On the podcast today, we are going to speak about Chapter 80 of the Tao Te Ching, which makes up the 80th episode of the 81 meditations on the Tao Te Ching. And as usual, Guang will read Jia Fu Feng and Jane English's translation, and I will read Derek Lin's translation.
A small country has fewer people. Though there are machines that can work 10 to 100 times faster than people, they are not needed. The people take death seriously and do not travel far. Though they have boats and carriages, no one uses them. Though they have armor and weapons, no one displays them. People return to the knotting of rope in place of writing. Their food is plain and healthy, their clothes fine but simple, their home secure. They are happy in their lives. Though they live within sight of their neighbors, and crowing cocks and barking dogs are heard across the way, yet they leave each other in peace while they grow old and die.
Small country, few people. Let them have many weapons but not use them. Let the people regard death seriously and not migrate far away. Although they have boats and chariots, they have no need to take them. Although they have armors and weapons, they have no need to display them. Let the people return to tying knots and using them. Savor their food, admire their clothes, content in their homes, happy in their customs. Neighboring countries see one another, hear the sounds of roosters and dogs from one another. The people, until they grow old and die, do not go back and forth with one another. So in this chapter of the Tao Te Ching, which is the penultimate chapter of the Tao Te Ching, we are looking at Lao Tzu's philosophy of the contentment of contentment, as opposed to a type of expansionist philosophy, keeping up with the Joneses, that was very rife, especially in Lao Tzu's time during the Warring States period, due to Confucian philosophy. Now, in saying that, this chapter doesn't just mean something to Lao Tzu's time, it also translates to our time in this present moment.
Yeah, that's right. It's very reflective on Lao Tzu's perspective in the contemporary time that he was alive. As you mentioned, the warring states of China at that time. So all these smaller or bigger empires are trying to look over the fence and trying to take more land of neighboring countries and try to expand their population so they can make the country stronger and this and that. But in this chapter, Lao Tzu recommend that actually small country with a little people is actually fine. It might be an ideal society, right? And that sounds pretty ideal too, actually. And that is very, in relation to the today's world, as you mentioned, it has very direct connection to this chapter, I think. And we need to take this message pretty seriously, I think, right? Because we have this endless desire of expansionism, right? Expanding in many ways, expanding our bank account, expanding our profiles, and expanding our social media following account, and so on, right?
That's important, yeah.
Yes. So that's the individual level, and also the national level as well. They're trying to, fight over something that is actually not important, but that leads into war very easily nowadays. And also Lao Tzu mentions that machines, right? Like although the machine can do the 10 to 100 times faster than human, we need them, right? That actually is very different to some people who think otherwise today, right? People love AI these days especially, right? And people sometimes neglect the negative side of what AI can bring, right? I think the same thing was happening when machine was taking over the world, right? Machines were taking humans' job, right? So that people lose their jobs, and same thing is happening right now with basically robots are basically ruling our lives, so that they take a big part of our life, right? And some people love the artificial intelligence for some reason, but they wonder why they're so depressed and unhappy, because that is very directly connected to our mental health as well.
That's right. And, if you were translating this in the modern day. The small community don't need their smartphones or their social media accounts, and they're perfectly happy. They don't need to know what's going on Facebook or YouTube or this and that, and they're completely fine. And again, that also relates to the outsourcing of human skills and that. So even with the smartphones, with social media and so forth and so on, you're actually outsourcing your own mind in a lot of sense, and you kind of willingly exploit yourself. And so Lao Tzu is very careful about this in the ancient times. And you were mentioning it, not even to that extent. Like he's talking about like out in the fields, human labour getting replaced by maybe a plough, let's say, instead of using a shovel, right? And so he was concerned about that because of the sheer fact, and also like when we look at simplicity and we look at manual labour, there is a piece, and it's mentally healthy to be active with your hands. And this is what a lot of people don't understand in the modern day, because people are fixated on their phones and on their keyboards, and the only movement they really make is either with their thumbs or with their fingers. But a lot of the reason why a lot of the more ancient cultures didn't suffer from these mental problems that we do in the modern days, because they were involved with manual labour. They were working with their hands and this and that. Korean-German philosopher Byung-Chul Han, he talks a lot about this, particularly in his book, The Burnout Society, where we've developed a culture where we've gone away from using our hands, and we are just observing life through a lens, right? And that lens is the internet and social media. But there's a lot of peace actually in, like, for example, if you have a garden and you tend to that garden, let's say every day, it takes the focus off you, and you're not doing that even intentionally. It's because you're caring for something in nature. There's kind of this calibration between you and nature itself when you're going through this process. So a lot of times, like, what is good for a lot of people's mental health is start a garden, have a garden, grow some flowers, absorb what the flowers are like, and watch their own personal journey, the flower's own journey, right? And so we've developed a society that's gone far away from that, and that was Lao Tzu's warning. If we continually go down this path that Confucius wanted us essentially to go down, even with becoming so sophisticated linguistically through writing and so forth and so on, Lao Tzu sort of actually has a negative in some sense, because like he mentions in this chapter, returning back to the tied knots as a form of communication and recording events, right? Which was a type of, like I said, language pre-paper and writing. And so Lao Tzu sort of thought that was actually positive, because when we developed paper and writing and we developed sophisticated forms of literacy and so forth and so on, it only made life a lot more complicated. And so Lao Tzu was actually on the cusp of where this world was becoming more increasingly complicated, as opposed to, he was kind of this conduit between both the simple world and the more sophisticated societies that we are a product of in the modern day.
Yes. Yes, using the knotted rope as a communication tool is quite interesting, right? Like, obviously Lao Tzu wrote this in his language, the Tao Te Ching he did. But he definitely appreciated that the simple communication tools like knotted rope, because it's very symbolic, right? That there is a lot of trust in using something like that. It's definitely, you don't need phones and like social media. You definitely don't need these complicated tools of communication. You're actually directly have a connection with the people, so that is a direct communication. You don't need anything more than that, right? So even using the simple communication tool is even going back to things are very manual, I think. And this has been studied by like a scientist who studies human brain, and how human brain actually works and functions as an analog. So that is why I think, a lot of mental health problems been happening for a long time. But I think almost everyone is suffering from that nowadays is because of it. The speed of that is sped up by having, let's say, smartphone, literally, right? So that is before 2000, after 2000. right? But that's internet, the 2010, I should say. So before 2010 or after 2010 is a completely different world. In 2000s, that we had these lots of information and flooding time came with the internet using the online world. But since 2010, it's sped up a lot more. From using smartphone and these apps came into place, and that replaced our little things in our life, even like a banking and things like that. We used to go to the bank to do certain things, but now you don't have to be even in your country. You can do remote and online, right, without any problem. Yeah, that definitely gave us some convenience, obviously, but also it took a lot away from something that is very important, right? When we go and see people at the shops directly, even online shopping and this and that. But when we actually physically go somewhere to buy something, you actually get to meet someone. You had to communicate with people directly. But it's almost funny even that we're talking about it as if it's something. Of course, we should communicate with one another. But it's very sad that we came to the world that we're not even doing that every day, right?
Yeah.
Like how many of us sometimes that we don't even need to go out in a day at all, staying in your a little apartment or a house, even in a room, right? Everything, food is delivered. Yeah, that computer, internet, everything is there, so you can do whatever search you need to do online, or they can do also the entertaining tool for you as well. So it's we are too much of spoiled, and at the same time, from being spoiled in that degree, kind of destroying us as a human being.
Yeah, we are destroying ourselves from within, actually, as you were alluding to. And it is a good point in relation to Lao Tzu, because the problems that we're encountering and that he saw was this problem between an achievement-based society versus a traditional-based natural society, right? And so he could see that the mentality in the Warring States period was this new development of this type of achievement-based society, right? Where you do certain things to get positive reinforcement and you get all of these rewards if you are a certain type of person, as opposed to older Taoist societies, the ones that he is mentioning in this chapter, that they don't have that concept of achievement-based, because it's just you wake up, fart, smell the roses, go out and do your work, enjoy some rice wine in the afternoon, play with your kids, repeat. And life is simple, and there's no complexity in life in general, right? And so he could see that this was happening. And so what's happened in the modern day through social media, through the internet and everything like this, is we've just enhanced this achievement-based society. And so it leads to all sorts of psychopathy within people, because we're not really focusing on what really matters most of the time and the simple things in life. And then as a result, we fall victim to, like what you were saying, Uber Eats and all of these things that just keep us disconnected from the world, which actually doesn't breed good mental health. And this has been studied, right? You need to have touch, you need to have connection with people, which actually breeds a lot of good mental health within yourself, right? And so we're breeding a society based on this achievement-based society where we're continually disconnecting from each other, because where do we achieve the results that we want? Online, through social media. This is the new medium for how you are measured with success. And then so people become a victim then of analytics, of likes and dislikes and so forth and so on. So Lao Tzu could understand it, and he's looking at it very small scale. Now, because we've gone so far, 2,500 years down the line, we are where we are now, and most people are drowning in this achievement-based society because not everyone's going to make it, right? And so Lao Tzu's mentality was kind of a philosophy for losers, right? You're not a loser per se, but that you're not everyone's going to be a winner in an achievement-based society. It can never happen. It can never happen. People see famous people and they think, I can do that too. And there's the American dream, you can do it. And it's no, you can't do it. You've got certain aptitudes and talents and skills that apply to certain things. You might be good at pottery. You're not going to be an action movie star like The Rock. It's not going to happen. Stick to pottery. And pottery is probably a lot more peaceful and less stress than being the rock. So someone might want to be the rock, and it's like, you know what it's like to be that guy? There's a lot of stress, and he's got a high threshold for stress, and not everyone has that, right? And so we have to be real with ourselves, but what we have to do is we have to really pinpoint that we are in an achievement-based society. And so when you're in an achievement-based society, how can you disentangle yourself from that and come back to more of a natural, traditional-based way of living, which is better for your health and sanity? But the way that we need to do that is we need to have gratitude for the things that we have in our life. Stop keeping up with the Joneses. Don't have an expansionist approach. And come back to that real natural mentality and way of being.
Yeah, unfortunately, society seems to reward the sort of the rock type of people, as in like high achieved people, like so-called successful people, right? They promote these people, and the society rewards those people more often than the people who follow traditional way. But that doesn't mean that way is right, I don't think.
No, of course not.
Because everyone knows that majority of people are not like that. And that is very small minority, often minority actually. And unfortunately, for some reason, the society drives entire population to be like someone like a rock or the Elon Musk or these incredibly successful people. But there's only one rock, there's only one Elon Musk, and we can't beat those people.
No.
And society and education system only teach us to pursue that kind of success for some reason, but without understanding each individuals are different. But we need to learn, and we need to also know that as an individual and being different to one another has a tremendous value to the world, actually. And from knowing that can only help ourselves be truly happy. Like, just pursuing success and chasing success, we know that it's not going to bring a lot of happiness. And often the richest people are the unhappiest people in the world, right? The most depressed people in the world. And so that we need to know, like in this chapter, the Lao Tzu saying, knowing the contentment, not looking over the fence over the very close by, but the neighboring country that you can even see and you can even hear the dogs barking and this and that. But because you're completely fine in where you are, in your country, in your village or whatever, so that you don't look over the fence and you're happy with what you have. So in order to experience that kind of happiness, I think we need to just give ourselves a bit more time to chill.
That's right. And that what you were saying then is related to kind of this stepping out of these traditional based societies, small scale societies, into these large scale societies, which then creates all of these other problems, right? And creates that expansionist mentality, the keeping up with the Jones mentality, which would have been very odd back in Tao societies to keep up with the Joneses, because everything that you did was just natural anyway. There was not sort of a methodology that you should follow in that society to make you succeed. There was no idea of success in the society. There was just being one with the society and just living as naturally as a human. And I think that we're like in straitjackets now, right? Like we're like this, living in this society, but we're completely mad because we've gone so far away from what it is to be natural in a society, because the society itself is an achievement-based society. It is an expansionist society which lacks wu-wei. And so how can you be healthy and sane in that society, right? And so one of the things in the last, let's say, 50, 60 years is people have tried to recreate these small societies. You might see spiritual communities pop up all over the world, right, trying to recreate these societies. But a lot of it's contrived, and that's why a lot of them don't work, because they create the society, but they base it on certain principles that people have to follow to come into the society. Now, is that a natural society, or is that still an expansionist society cloaked as a small-scale society, right? And so that's why they don't work. And that's why you and I have been to a lot of these smaller type of communities, which end up becoming very cultish. And so that's because they have an overarching principle or religion or whatnot that you ought to follow. And then you say, well, why did it work for Lao Tzu? It's like, because he was still doing the knots.
Sending a letter.
Sending a letter, you know what I mean? Still, he didn't have a sophisticated philosophy that was over the society that everyone had to follow. Like he didn't have that. It's just like, we follow the way in nature. They had not gone through the ringer of socialization at that point, right? Where he was kind of on the cusp of, you know, humanity beginning that process of where we go through the ringer through socialization and we warp our nature to what we are now, right? And so his society and other older societies didn't have any philosophy that shaped them and that they needed to abide by. They didn't have any commandments, right? You and I have gone to certain smaller communities that have, like, for example, will have 4 principles that you need to follow. And it's like, well, that's good in theory, but you've already thrown a snake in the grass. You've created this small-scale society based on, you know, natural principles and this and that, where we're getting back to nature, we're getting back to organic farming, we're getting back to community. But then you throw a snake in the grass with these 4 principles that you cannot force everyone to believe in those four principles. And that's where these small-scale modern societies fall apart, because to expect that everyone's going to fully, wholeheartedly believe in that, you would have to keep that to like 1 or 2 families that actually really believe in it, right? You wouldn't want to expand it out to like 5,000 people or 10,000 people. It ain't going to work. It just won't work.
Yes. That kind of reminds me of that, like a counterculture time in 40 years ago from now, right? So there were some examples over in America had a lot of cultish community surrounded by some like an Indian, some guru or something like that, right? So, and then even today, like some people, they self-claim the enlightened person, and they take advantage of their followers, and
it's very easy to do these days.
So, and they take a large sum of money and things like that. And again, like that, all those examples, as we know, been failed, and it's been proven, it's been shown. Even the devotees of these people come out and say certain dark stories, right? So, but we can understand where they come from as a motivation. We can get inspired by that. But at the same time, it's a very dangerous idea, like what you say. It's somewhat inorganic, right? It has to happen organically instead of having these principles that you need to follow strictly. And that is actually completely going against the living in a natural society, right? So it's very contradictory in a sense. So it can't be contrived. It has to happen organically somehow.
And I think that's our problem in the modern day, isn't it? We're trying to create a natural society within this complex matrix that we've built for ourselves. And it's almost impossible, right? There's no chance of a utopia. But what there is a chance of, that Lao Tzu is saying in this chapter, for all spiritual aspirants, particularly Taoists, is that if we return to that simple path, even in this chapter he mentions things like, plain eating and this and that, right? And it reminds me of like that dish in Korea, I can't remember what the dish is, but it's a plain noodle, and you would think that it's not going to be delicious, but it actually is delicious, right? It's just that we've kind of destroyed our taste buds throughout time, which kind of relates also to chapter 12 when Lao Tzu talks about deadening your palate and this and that.
Yes.
And so, like in chapter 12, he does mention about the desires of the eye and the desires of the belly, right? And so that relates here, where the desires of the eye are these artificial desires that are far away, that are hard to grasp, hard to obtain, right? Which becomes part of this expansionist, achievement-based society. But then you've got the desires of the belly, and these are the simple desires, right? As I mentioned, like maybe having that bland Korean noodle soup, but you're completely content having that. It nourishes you. There's something about it. And having simple clothes, not being a big noter, dressing a certain way, like in the modern day, everyone wants to stand out. you don't have that type of hypnosis that you need to stand out. You haven't been brought up in a culture that I need to stand out, because you're not a victim of the achievement-based society anymore. You've returned to the natural, traditional-based society. And if nobody likes you, all well and good. If people don't think you up to standard with the achievement-based society, all well and good. If they think your diet is silly, all well and good. All I eat is bland Korean noodle.
Yes, yes.
So Lao Tzu even went to that extent that if we want to disentangle ourselves from this achievement-based expansionist, keep up with the Jones mentality, returning back to more of these simple ways is a lot better, even to the point of the tied knots, right? Like in this day and age, of course, we don't even know what the hell we're doing with the tied knots, but maybe we would go back to reading books as opposed to reading Facebook posts or watching loads of YouTube or Netflix and this and that. Maybe we would revert back to something more simple like reading books.
Yes, I just wanted to add that in a sense of the high achievement-based society, that how it's been destroying the world, basically, I think. And since the Second World War, I think around the world there's been like some sort of phenomena was happening, as in to rebuild the countries and rebuild the economy and this and that, right? So that through that time, being kind of the very beginning of the idea of a successful businessmen, entrepreneurs, and this and that, right? So in a way that there's a first generation of a business, successful business people was born, I think, around that time, and but still, the average people were happy and making money and this and that. But as time gone by, like 80s and 90s, and people become successful and rich and this and that, and the stock market thing came into place, and this investment companies making money through investors, and then they make investors lots of money and this and that. And so time grew, and so today, this beginning of a social media era somewhat gave people false idea of success, I think. So you can have this many followers, and you can have this many subscribers, and you can get your message out there viral and this and that, and you can be this social media generation's successful person, right? So this gives people the idea of that I can also achieve that, right? Like you said about sticking out. I can stick out from having this many followers and this and that. So this kind of it gives people a false idea of success, and a false idea of that you are so special as well, I think, right? So that made people eventually more miserable, I think, because it was an illusion that they had, but they realized that was an illusion, right? They thought that was possible, right? But people thought that was real, but actually it's an illusion, and they believed in that illusion. But once they really realized it wasn't real, they get disappointed and this and that, right? So and everyone wants to keep up with the Joneses, and they want to achieve things in a different degree, but that can only lead people to this, like a self-exploiting yourself constantly to achieve something that is actually completely empty, right?
That's right. Again, get a garden, get a dog, I don't know, go play cricket in the backyard.
That's right.
Do something with your hands, get away from this achievement-based cycle that a lot of people are in. And as you were saying, social media is the height of that, because of the illusion that everyone is going to make it. Obviously, on platforms like YouTube and this and that, that's almost impossible these days, because the market is so saturated, and every channel's views essentially have gone down because of that market saturation. And that's just a byproduct of more people joining the platform and creating their own channels and so forth and so on. It was always going to happen, but there may be a tipping point in the future, because in the end of the day, everyone's going to work out that they're not going to succeed, right? It's not the way it is. It's a roller coaster when you go on these platforms and you think that you're going to be somebody or this and that. It's probably better to invest in something that you can make with your hands. If you like Eastern philosophy, for example, maybe go about it the way I did. Because I began this before social media was a thing. Write books, write articles, do something with your hands. And I write with, as you know, with a pen, very messily with a pen. Only I can decode it. But go and do that, because there's a naturalness to it. There's a connection with your mind and your arm and your hand and the way you write and the language you've been taught with. There's a beauty in that process, much more than just plain keyboard warrior like doing this. There's no connection there.
Yes.
So I feel like there's going to be a real renaissance in content outside of social media in the future, because it's too saturated. I think that there's going to be ways of where people can make offline content that will be appealing, or maybe online content but outside of the social media platforms. And so that's what I would suggest to people. Harness a skill, do something with your hands. Don't invest too much in this achievement-based online society, because the chances of succeeding is a pie in the sky. It's much like everyone saying that everyone can attain the American dream, when it's completely impossible. Be grateful for what you have in your life. Realize that you are perfect as you are right now. There's nothing that you need to do to update or upgrade your life. You are 100% perfect as you are, because that's essentially what the Tao had intended for you. So guys, we hope you enjoyed, and we'll see you guys next time.